So this is part 2 of the June 2013 Unit 2 paper. This is the part where you have to read the case study and then answer questions based on that. I would strongly suggest that you read the case study first before you watch this video, because I won't have enough time to go through the case study in detail, so it might be quite difficult to follow what I'm saying for some of the answers if you haven't read that first. So pause the video if you haven't read it, go read that, then come back again. I'm going to move straight on to question 1. Explain one reason why the takeaway food market may be described as dynamic. So we've got the word explain, and it is only 4 marks. So we're just going to give simple definition and explain what it means. So let's define the word dynamic. A dynamic market is one in which supply and or demand is changing constantly. So, for example, within the takeaway food market, consumers' tastes are changing a lot all the time. So maybe one year pizza is really popular, then the next year people like Thai food, or the year after that people really like Chinese, or it's just a combination of the different things over time. So because consumers' tastes in food and takeaway changes all the time, that causes it to be dynamic. You could also say because takeaway food relies on raw materials, on food being supplied, there's always going to be changes in supply of different foods. For example, in the case study, it's saying how there is a drought on coconut milk at the moment. So at the moment, coconut milk supply has gone down, but next month it might be the supply of cheese, or the supply of noodles, or the supply of rice. So supply is always changing, demand is always changing. Therefore, the takeaway food market is dynamic. It's always changing. And so that's how you would answer that question. No need to give any sort of evaluation or anything like that. Question 8. Thrown in a price elasticity of demand question. It's saying that there's been a 40% increase in the price of milk, but demand has gone down by 10%. So quantity demanded down by 10, price up by 40. Calculate the PED. So you'd start with giving the equation. Price elasticity of demand is percentage change in demand over percentage change in price. So the percentage change in demand, it's gone down by 10%. It's decreased by 10%. Remember, it's important to put those pluses or minuses in there, or you'll come out with the wrong answer. So it's minus 10% over plus 40%. So this number over this number, and that will get you your answer. So minus 10 divided by 4, 0.25. So then that's your answer for 8A. It says comment on your result. Now if you're asked to comment on the result of an elasticity question, it means what does the number show you? So the number is minus 0.25. Well, it shows us that it is an inelastic product. If it's between 0 and minus 1, it's inelastic. So it shows us that coconut milk is inelastic. That means that as the price changes, demand will change by less than the price. And that's shown in the question here. So that is the answer to 8A and B. Moving on to 9, they want you to draw and analyze why the price of coconut milk has increased. So you draw your supply and demand graph in that box there and comment on it underneath. Now this is 8 marks. It specifically states that you should analyze the answer, which means that you don't need to evaluate. You're going to get 5 marks out of 8 for the graph, and you're going to get the other 3 marks for explaining the graph. It's a pretty simple question actually. It's a good way to get a lot of marks as long as you get the graph right. So you'd start by drawing a basic supply demand graph. 1 supply line, 1 demand line. Make it look like an X, like it always does. Why is the price of coconut milk increased? Well, in the case study it tells us that there has been a drought, so there's less coconut being produced and an infestation of beetles that are eating all of the coconuts. Therefore, supply is going down. There is less coconuts, therefore there's less coconut milk. So you draw a new supply line, and it would be shifting to the left. It's supply moving to the left, that's showing supply going down. In order to get the 5 marks, you'd put your two supply and demand. You'd put supply and demand to start off with, label the equilibrium point, the center point where they meet. Then you would draw a new supply line and show that shifting to the left. In fact, I will just show you on the mark scheme here. The best way is to illustrate what's going on. This is what your graph should look like. So you can see we've got the original equilibrium point where supply and demand meet. We've got the new equilibrium point where supply shifts and meets demand. You've labeled it all up. That's going to get you 5 marks. The other 3 marks come from explanation. So you'd say, because there's been the drought, because there's been this beetle infestation, it means that supply's gone down, therefore they will supply less at a higher price. So the price has gone up and supply has gone down. Moving on to the next question. Question 10. Explain the likely impact of rising food costs on an independent takeaway business such as Leon. Now, this question, the wording is slightly misleading. Explain. So that there's no need to evaluate. Explain basically means knowledge, application, analysis. So we haven't had to do any evaluation at this point. Right, so rising food costs, what effect would that have on a takeaway business? So you'd start by saying rising food costs would lead to an increase in the costs of raw materials for Leon. Therefore, if raw materials go up, those are variable costs. Those are costs that you use in the production of your product, whatever it is you're making. In this case, it's fast food. So variable costs have gone up, which means that they will supply less. Supply goes down as your costs go up. So Leon would find that their costs are going up because their raw materials will go up. This means that they will supply less products to their customers at a higher price. Now, what does that mean? That's going to get you knowledge and application, but analyze. Analyze is you've given your point, you've applied it to the case study, but what does that mean? What's the outcome? Well, just think, if you are a takeaway company and your product is going up in price, well, generally that means that less people are going to want to buy your product because the takeaway market is really saturated. It's very popular. There's a lot of takeaway companies. If your prices go up, demand will go down as consumers will simply move to another takeaway company. So for Leon, it will have a negative impact on their business because prices have gone up, supply's gone down, they've been forced to put their prices up, which means demand should fall as well. They could look to switch to another supplier to try and find a cheaper supplier, but it doesn't ask us to evaluate. We don't need to say however. So that point that I've given you there, that's good enough to get you those marks. Move on to the next one. Question 11. Now, assess 2 possible marketing strategies a UK business could adopt under the circumstances that the UK's economic recovery has been described as fragile. So the idea is the economy is fragile. That means we've been in a recession. We're starting to recover. Think of that, the business cycle. We were at the bottom. We're starting to recover, but it's very fragile. That means recovery is very slow. So we're not really that much better than we were in recession. Things are starting to improve, but very slowly. So if you're a business, what type of marketing strategies could you adopt? Well, this is a very broad question. Marketing strategies, that's a massive thing you could talk about. You can think of the 4 Ps. That's the marketing mix. Basically, you can mention anything from any of the 4 Ps. You could mention price, product, place, or promotion. Let's start with price. If you're a UK business, what you could do is you could maybe sell your products at you could use some sort of pricing strategy. So for example, you could use penetration pricing. Remember, penetration pricing is when you set your prices low to entice customers in, and then over time, once customers have started to enjoy and buy your product, you then raise your prices. So maybe a UK business such as a fast food company could use penetration pricing. They could set prices low, entice customers in. Customers will be willing to pay low prices right now because the economy is fragile. People don't have a lot of money. So get them in now while your prices are low, and then as the economy recovers more, then increase your prices. That's one idea. You could, if you wanted to be on the same theme of pricing, you could talk about competitive pricing, where you basically set your prices based on your competitors. So, set them at slightly lower than what your competitors are doing. That way you try to entice your customers in. So something about pricing would be a good answer, but it does say here assess two possible strategies. So we're going to have to give an evaluation point here. With pricing, you could say something along the lines of perhaps there is no gap in the market for whatever the business is that you're doing, that people want to buy very low price products. Or a better one than that, I think, would be, you could talk about elasticity. You could say it depends if the product is elastic or inelastic, because certain products, if you drop the price, you're not going to get any more demand than you did before. If it's an inelastic product, you could drop the price, but demand would stay roughly the same. So there'd be no point for a business to lower its prices if it was inelastic. Demand would stay about the same. Another strategy you could talk about would be to maybe sell inferior products. If we're saying that the economy is fragile right now, we're assuming people don't have a lot of money. If you therefore say that you're selling an inferior product, then as people's incomes are low, they're more likely to buy those types of products. They're probably not going to buy luxury products right now because, well, they just don't have enough money. So that could be a second strategy you could talk about. Evaluation point with that would be as the economy starts to recover, so it's saying that there is recovery but it's fragile. If you keep selling an inferior product as the economy recovers, so in a year or 2 years, if you keep selling that inferior product, you're going to end up with your demand falling because, well, people don't want to buy the product anymore because they'll have more money. So it's a short-term strategy to use. There are loads of other options that you could choose, and I suggest that you look at the mark scheme for this one because I don't have time to cover all the answers for this. So quickly moving on to question 12. Evaluate the likely impact of a depreciation of the pound sterling on UK manufacturing. Right. Simple answer is it depends if the UK manufacturing sector is importing or exporting. As the pound depreciates, that means it gets weaker. If you're a UK manufacturer and you are buying raw materials from abroad, you are importing from abroad, that's going to be a bad thing for you. You won't be able to afford to buy as much raw material from abroad as you could before. So that will raise your costs, which means that supply will go down and your selling price will go up, which means probably demand will fall as well. Other way around, if you are a UK manufacturing business and you're making stuff here in the UK but selling it abroad, exporting it, that will be good for you because your prices are going down, the pound's depreciated, which means that demand for your products abroad will go up, your exports will go up. Evaluation point for that is it depends what the product is that you're selling. For example, if you're saying that, oh, I get raw materials from abroad and now it's got more expensive, well, maybe there's option to switch to another country that sells raw materials the same thing as well. So you can always switch your supplier if one country gets too expensive. Another point you could say is that if you are exporting to other countries, it depends about about the product itself, because if you are selling a unique product, it really doesn't matter if the pound is depreciating or appreciating. If your product is unique, then it doesn't really matter. Demand will still be high, whatever's going on.